On today's show, we continue our World Juniors breakdown with roster and lineup predictions for Sweden, Finland, Czechia, and Slovakia. All coming up on Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, I break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi Kalikesh. I'm a scout and prospect analyst across multiple platforms, including this one. And I've got a great show for you today. We're going to be continuing our World Junior rosters breakdown. Now, some of these rosters are really hypothetical. A lot of stuff hasn't been announced at all yet. These are just sort of projections and sort of what I would do in charge of these teams. Now, before we get into any of it, make sure to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, and make sure to follow us along on your favorite podcasting platform and make us your first listen of the day. It's always very much appreciated. So we'll start with Team Sweden. Sweden for me is just a team that's just much stronger at forward than a defense, and especially in goal. Um, Among the reasons why Simon Edvinsson surprisingly declined his invitation to the World Juniors, which you don't see often. He's playing in the AHL with the Grand Rapids Griffins and developing pretty well in that league. So I kind of understand him not wanting to go and compete against his age group when he's getting pro experience right now. But at the same time, again, something you don't see often from World Junior eligible defensemen and just World Junior players in general. It's not something you see a lot. Now let's move on right into the goaltender discussion in Sweden. So they've got three netminders who I think are pretty tied, and not for being very good, but simply because there's a clear lack of other netminders available in this, for the World Juniors that are age eligible for this tournament. So they've got Carl Lindbaum, a seventh round pick of the Vegas Golden Knights in 2021. Their second string would probably be Ian Blomqvist, an undrafted netminder, and another undrafted netminder in Marcus Brandman. Now, this is not a goaltender core that offers much promise. That doesn't offer much confidence. And might be pretty easy to get goals through them, especially with the lack of a Simon Edmondson, a proper top end, high caliber first pair defender on that team. Moving on to defenders. Speaking of which, there are eight of them so far that Sweden has retained. Again, they've got a 24-man roster. I think they're going to stick with that. Now they've got Adam Engstrom, a Montreal Canadiens third round pick in 2022. They've got a Florida prospect in Ludwig Jansson, Hugo Jonasson, who went undrafted, Jakob Noren, same thing. Kalle Adelius, a New York Islander second round pick in this past draft. Elias Pettersson, not that one, the defender that also belongs to the Vancouver Canucks. He's a defensive prospect they picked up in last year's draft. We've got Axel Sandin Palika, who's a 2023 NHL draft eligible, and he's been playing really, really well, so definitely deserves the invite. And Victor Schuholm, who is another undrafted defender. Now, for me, the likely pairings in this situation would probably be Kalle Delius and Ludwig Janssen at the top. I think those two are going to be playing really well off each other. Delius is very good with the puck. Um, does have some defensive limitations, but the things he can do with the puck are really promising. His playmaking, his vision are pretty good, and he's got really, really good skating, which complements his rush defending really well. But in his own zone, it's a different story. You pair that with Janssen, who's really good in his own zone, but can also make breakout passes pretty efficiently and is a good skater. By the way, Sweden, it's kind of a common thread between all their players. They're all really good skaters. I don't know what they put in the water in Sweden, but it's definitely a thing. But moving on to the second pair, I think Adam Engstrom and Axel Sandin Palika would be a great second pair. Um, Engstrom is a bit of a Swiss Army knife as a player who thinks his way out of trouble, who consistently looks for outlets and plays pretty simple hockey. He does, have a tendency to drive the puck up too high when he's carrying it out, not delegating at the right times. But that's where Axel Sandin Palika comes in. He's a great offensive weapon. He's good on off the rush. He can defend in his own zone as well. Just a well-rounded game with a lot of different facets and a pretty decent offensive ceiling. So I think those two will play off each other really well. And then the final pair would be Elias Pettersson and Victor Schulholm. Those two would be pretty interesting to watch together. I think that Pettersson is the type of player who goes pretty sort of under the radar in these sort of tournaments, but actually has decent defensive impact. Uses his stick really well. Not the most physical, not the most punishing, but can definitely hold his own. And then you've got Jakob Noren and Hugo Jonasson on the outside as two undrafted defenders. No slight on them. I just think that the guys ahead of them just deserve to be where they're at. Now, moving on to the forward discussion for Team Sweden. So they've actually got a very stacked forward core for this tournament. To name some guys, well, to name them all, there's 13 of them. Philip Bystedt of the San Jose Sharks, Leo Carlson, a top four prospect in this upcoming draft. Jonathan Lekkerimäki, who's another Vancouver Canucks prospect. Fabian Lucelle, Boston Bruins. Liam Ögren, Minnesota Wild. They've got an undrafted player in Milton Oscarsson. Haven't watched much of him, but he can't be much better than the guys ahead of him in this lineup. Noah Östlund of the Buffalo Sabres, Oscar Pettersson, a fourth round pick of the Ottawa Senators. We've got Simon Robertson of the St. Louis Blues, Isaac Rosan of the Buffalo Sabres, and three more guys in Victor Sternborg of Chicago, William Stromgren of Calgary, and Fabian Wagner of Winnipeg. Now, we'll talk about the lineup itself and what's going to look like, who's going to play with who. I've really gone for players that I think will complement each other really well. Our first line for me would be Isaac Rosan, Leo Carlson, and Fabian Lucelle. Now, Carlson and Lucelle for me are match made in heaven. Carlson's really good at delaying, protecting the puck, and shielding it, and waiting for his options to come to him. Whereas Lucelle is a pace pusher; he's constantly going to be driving around defenders, creating havoc off the rush. So those two would work really well off each other. You add to that Rosen, who's a Swiss Army knife type of player who can shoot pretty well, can make plays at a high level, but also is very responsible defensively, really good with his stick, decently physical. It's a very balanced first line. I think it could do a lot of damage at this tournament. And the reason those three are together is because I do not want to break up this second line. They've been playing together forever at every level with your Gardens down to the J20 level, and that's Liam Ögren, Noah Östlund, and Jonathan Lekkerimäki. Those three are what you call a match made in heaven. Lekkerimäki, a pure goal scorer, Östlund, a very smart, very intelligent distributor, great playmaking ability, and Ögren, who can do absolutely everything for you, from defend to shoot to pass to man the forecheck, get back on defense. He's the defensive element on that line, and they work really, really well off each other. It's a very smart combination. Ergren for me is the one with the most projectable elements to the NHL level, but those other two have the higher upside, in my opinion. I think Östlund, if he hits, could be a top six center with a lot of value on the power play. Lekkerimäki, he's kind of weird for me to scout. He's been kind of tough to watch this year. The issue with him is he doesn't really have a B game, so if his goal scoring doesn't translate to the NHL, you're not really getting much out of him. Moving on to the third line, that would be Simon Robertson, Philip Bystedt, and Oscar Pettersson. Now you can sort of switch the second and third line around. That would still work out. I think Robertson is going to be offering a lot of goal scoring. Bystedt has that ability to connect with his teammates at decent paces. And he's got that big body that will be able to wreak havoc in the center lane of the ice. Then you add Oscar Pettersson to that, who's a player with really good hands, who can make plays through traffic. You've got a good combination. And then the fourth line would be William Stromgren, Victor Sternborg, and Fabian Wagner. Now, these are kind of sort of shoo-ins for me. I think all three of them have more value than Milton Oscarsson at this point. He's probably going to be the outlier in this 13-man roster. But I think these are three guys that can contribute defensively, do a good job. I'm not too sure about Wagner. I wasn't the highest on him, but he'll be interesting to watch in this upcoming World Championship. So that's going to be it for our first segment. Now we're going to get into Team Finland's roster and lineup predictions right after these messages. Do you like betting? BetOnline.net is your number one source for any wager that interests you. From the NFL to the NBA to the MLB, and even NCAA football, UFC, golf, anything you like, they have you covered. You can find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in depth analysis on every game on their website or app. They're, of course, a great source for all of your sports wagering information with live betting so you can keep up with bets as they unfold. They've got up to the minute scores for every sport out there. They're the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite games and events. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet online, where the game starts. All right, so moving on to Team Finland. Now they've got a decent roster, but nothing's really official. Nothing at all has been announced so far, actually, for them, which is pretty shocking, given that Team Canada and Team Sweden have already finalized their rosters, whereas we haven't even heard much in terms of even starting the camp for Finland. So I'll keep it kind of pretty simple with them and just go for what I think that the projected lineup would be, and not sort of delve too far into extras and cuts and all that, but there's still a couple people players I want to mention. So for me, in the case of Team Finland, the first line would almost definitely be Ville Koivunen of the Carolina Hurricanes, Brad Lambert of the Winnipeg Jets, and Joakim Kemell of the Nashville Predators. Now, in Koivunen, you've got a great playmaker, a great two-way guy who's going to be able to, play the defensive side of the puck really well and get chances for his teammates, create turnovers and rifle them up the ice for a streaking Lambert or Kamel. Lambert for me is one of the best skaters, if not the best skater in this tournament. His skating stride is excellent, and he uses it really well off the rush to create chances. If you get him the puck in the defensive zone and let him skate it up, he's almost definitely going to be in the offensive zone in possession of the puck before you even know it. Then you add on top of that Joachim Kemell's goal scoring ability, his physicality, his hands and tight. I think that line can do a lot of damage. They definitely rival Sweden's first line. I think they even outplay it and outperform it in this tournament. But I think that Sweden's depth is going to be more important. Moving on to the second line for Finland, it drops off pretty quickly. For me, the second line would be Mikko Matika of the Arizona Coyotes, Topi Roni of the Calgary Flames, and Mikko Huhtanen of the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, those three, you can see the steep drop off between line one and line two. I think that Finland's forward core is less impressive than their D core, which is kind of the opposite of what it is for Sweden. So those three are kind of well-rounded players who don't necessarily excel at anything, but kind of do everything pretty well. But then on the third line, you've got our first 2023 eligible of this roster, and it's Kasper Haltinen, a big winger who can score, who can drive the net. You pair him with Oliver Kapanen of the Montreal Canadiens, who's pretty good in transition and making passes. Not too high on his defensive game or his goal scoring, but he can definitely make passes through lanes pretty well, and you just plug Yanni Newman on that line. Newman is a prospect of the Seattle Kraken. Could be a great fit for those two. And then finally, the fourth line is actually not bad. I think the talent is definitely spread out among the last three lines. But this final line for Finland, in my opinion, will probably be Samu Salminen of the New Jersey Devils, Aleksanteri Kaskimaki of the St. Louis Blues, and Kalle Väisänen of the New York Rangers. Now, of this crop, we've really just got Oliver Kapanen and Kalle Väisänen, who are sort of notable returnees amongst the guys who make the cut. I believe Lambert did play in that tournament, but it wasn't anything sort of outlandishly impressive. So Kapanen and Väisänen are sort of the guys that are going to be the most experienced at this tournament. It's going to be interesting to see him go about it. They're going to be playing in that bottom six, adding some experience to that bottom of the lineup, and hopefully, creating chances for your team. For me, the cuts, the guys who barely sort of missed the cut in this roster. First, Lenny Haminaho, who's another 2023 eligible for Team Finland. I think he barely misses out on the cut. There are just there's a lot of quality in this top 12. I just don't think that Haminaho has shown enough in terms of his actual play on the ice to merit a spot in that top 12. Add to that, Viljami Marjala of the Buffalo Sabres. He's one of the top leading scorers in the Finnish Junior 20 Liga. So he might be an option there. We've also got Sami Päivärinta, who's a twice undrafted forward. He's a diminutive center. He's 5'9", but he really impressed at the U20 level for Finland already. He had 7 points in 8 games for them in junior competition at the U20 level, at the international level. So that was pretty impressive of him. But let's move on to the decor. This is where it gets interesting for Finland. Their first pair for me is almost definite. It's going to be Aron Kiviharju, a 2024 NHL draft eligible and a potential top 3 pick in that draft. He's extremely good on his skates, just a lot of mobility, a lot of high end intelligence to his game. He reads the game really well. It's going to be really interesting to see him go at it. And I would pair him with Alexi Haimosalmi of the Carolina Hurricanes. Haimosalmi is another sort of offensive dynamo, but he's got a bit more sort of versatility to his game. I think Kiviharju has a certain play style and he sticks to it. Yes, he can do a tiny bit of everything, but his main thing is driving transition, getting to the offensive zone, moving along the blue line, showcasing his hands when closing down the slot. That's what he excels at. Whereas Jaime Salmi, I think, has more of a rush defending element than he does. Then the second pair would probably be Topias Villen of the New Jersey Devils and Otto Salin of the Los Angeles Kings. Now, admittedly, I haven't followed Otto Salin a whole lot since he got drafted, but I have been following Topias Villen of the New Jersey Devils, and man, his emergence has been outstanding. He's a double-digit point producer in the SHL right now, in his draft plus 2 year. It's very impressive to see him go at it at such a young age and do a decent job. I saw him as sort of a more physical and sort of defensively responsible defender, but he's added some offensive tools in the last years, and his intelligence with the puck is clearly shown once he was able to develop the skill set in the hands to be able to match that intelligence that he has. And then the third pair for me would probably be Jimmy Suomi and Casper Kulanumi of the Nashville Predators. Now, Suomi, when undrafted, I was pretty surprised to see that. I've been pretty impressed with what I've seen from him in the Liga. Kulanumi has been playing most of the year in the joint J20 level and has been pretty much crushing the competition since getting drafted last season. So I was pretty high on Kulanumi. I saw him as a decent prospect in this year, and yeah, he's proven me right. And then the final two that don't make the top six would be Kelly Irvasti, an undrafted defender, and the New York Islanders' Alexei Malinin. So again, the top pair for Finland of Kiviharju and Haima Salmi will be driving a lot of their offense. You pair that with Koivunen, Lambert, and Kamel, and you've got a front five, a core five that will do a lot of damage against top end teams. So teams have to be wary of those top players, make sure they match them really well. Coaches need to be on their toes regarding who's on the ice so that they're not left to play against lower end competition because you can't give any of these guys an inch. They'll take an arm. It's really impressive. And then finally, for the net minding discussion, for me, it's pretty clear cut and straightforward. It's going to be Nicholas Coco of the Seattle Kraken is going to be taking the net, and the only other guy that I would see sort of in this conversation, again, it's Finnish goaltending. I'm not really sort of the guy to go to for specifics about him. But Coco was drafted really high and has shown some good things so far. And the other I would mention is Aku Koskinvo, but he's been playing kind of poorly for Harvard. He's only figured in maybe 5-6 games, and he's letting a lot of goals. But the NCAA is pretty weird with stat lines, so he's one of those guys I would consider in terms of a backup to Nicholas Coco. But that's going to be it for the lineup of Team Finland. Now we're going to have a double to end the episode. We're going to look at Team Czechia and Team Slovakia. We're going to break down the projected lineups, pairings, and lines, and all that, as well as the final roster with extras. So we'll get to it right after these messages. All right, so to end out this episode, we're going to go with a doubleheader, Czechia and Slovakia, two countries that used to be one. So let's start on Czechia's side. They have got 15 forwards, 9 defenders, and 3 netminders left in their selection camp. So there's still 2 or 3 cuts to make in order to get down to 25 or 24 and be eligible for the tournament. On forward, they've got Andre Becker, an undrafted forward of the Prince George Cougars in the WHL. Jakub Rubenec of the Charlotte Islanders in the queue. He is a Vegas Golden Knights prospect. Yaroslav Shmelar, a New York Rangers prospect. We've got Peter Hauser, who really impressed me in my viewings of him. He plays for Sparta Praha in the Czech Republic. He's a New Jersey Devils prospect. Jakub Kosh, I haven't really seen much of. He plays for Ilves in Finland, but he's someone who I've heard good things about, and will probably be making this lineup, especially as a 2003 born drafted prospect. The odds are high. Then we go to Yuri Kulich, who plays for the Rochester Americans in the AHL, prospect of the Buffalo Sabres. He's been really impressive this year. He was one of the guys that I consider one of the top rookies in the AHL right now. So really happy to see him here. He's probably going to be their main offensive weapon, in that final third. Then you got Marcel, a really, really funny name. But I don't see much in this player that, warrants a top 12, definitive. He plays for Gatineau in the QMJHL. He's kind of average. Just to rifle them off quickly, Adam Matura, Matush Menchik, Lukasz Payer, Martin Rasavi of the Moose Jaw Warriors is one that I would look at as a pretty interesting offensive weapon on that first line. Robin Shapushek, Gabriel Sturck, Edward Shala is really, I think, the guy that they're going to go to for offense, and he's a 2023 eligible. He's a 2005 born prospect, one of the youngest born, 2023 NHL draft eligibles, and the youngest player on this team. He's almost definitely going to be leading the charge for them offensively with Yuri Kulich. Then at the end, we've got Matthias Shapovalov, who in recent viewings hasn't been much impressive to me, but definitely deserves a mention, in the top six for Team Czechia. And we move on to the defense. The draft prospects we have, you got Marek Alsher, Thomas Hamara of the Ottawa Senators. You got two Columbus Blue Jackets defenders in David Juracek and Stanislav Zvozil, who I think will be, forming the first pair. That's going to be the first pair of defenders for Czechia. We've got David Spacek as well of the Minnesota Wild, a Sherbrooke Phoenix defender, right-handed guy. He's really big, really strong, heavy shot, all that. So to end this off, I just also wanted to mention the netminders for Czechia. They've got Daniel Kral, Thomas Suchanek, and Oliver Satney. Now, I think that Suchanek is going to be the starter, but honestly, it's very tight between those three. I don't think there's really that much separating them. So I have a feeling that Suchanek is going to sort of make it out of that roster as the starter, even though I haven't watched much, if even at all, any of these netminders, and I don't consider myself a goaltending, expert by any means. I do understand the netminding game, understand what it takes, but it's very different than be able to scout at a high level. But based on what I've heard about them and based on their numbers alone, I think that Suchanek has the upper hand. Then we go to the defenders for Czechia. Again, the first pair will be a pair of Columbus Blue Jackets defenders in Stanislav Zvozil and David Juracek. Juracek is big, he's heavy, he's fast, he shoots really hard, and has all the physical tools on top of having a pretty decent hockey sense. Whereas Svozil is kind of the opposite, where his mind is kind of limited by his body. So, he thinks the game at a high level, understands it really well, but sometimes his brain thinks too fast for his hands and he makes a mistake. So stuff like that needs to be ironed out. But I think that he has sort of stood out from this decor as the top guy. Then we've got the second pair being Yuri Tihacek and David Spacek. Now, Tihacek has been a favorite of mine for about 2, 3 drafts now. He's quick, he's agile, he's extremely good offensively, offers a lot of value in transition. But for some reason, teams just aren't sold. I'm gonna guess that it's his size. He's pretty short. But pairing him with David Spacek would be an interesting sort of second line. Got one guy who's going to be driving the offense, one guy who's going to be sitting back and making good plays. So that combination could be pretty good. And then the third pair for me would be David Moravitz and Tomasz Halmara. Now, Moravitz is undrafted, but I've watched him a lot with Halifax, and I've been pretty impressed. He's one of the rare QMJHL defenders that I can go to bat for in terms of defensive upside. So I've liked what I've seen from him. And you add to that pair Tomasz Hamara, who does a bit of everything, but hasn't been really that good for Kitchener this year. I think it's a good chance for him to ride his way up the lineup, maybe push past either Tiacek or Spacek on the second pair, that kind of thing. But I think he's going to start off lower down because of a poor start to the season. It's going to take some time to sort of adapt to the World Juniors game. And then just as a keeper, as the seventh defender, I would keep Marek Alsher. I think he definitely deserves it based on his play. Very defensive, very physically strong. If they want someone who's going to offer more defense against bottom sixes, they can plug him in instead of David Moravitz or Thomas Ferrara, and he would probably do a good job. The only cut on defense would be Alice Czech, who admittedly I haven't watched a lot of, but he's playing Finnish junior hockey, not really putting up really good numbers. Again, there's still some hockey left to play, and all this needs to play out. But this is just based on what I know from these players. Obviously, I can't scout 100 players, in a couple weeks just to get you as much information as possible. There's a lot of these guys that I already know, especially the top end guys, but I think that especially in terms of defensemen in obscure leagues and especially netminders, my knowledge is limited. I rely on numbers, on analytics, and on hearsay from other scouts. So to close this off with the forward core for Czechia, we've got Yuri Kulich, Matthias Sapovalov, and Edward Shala as the first line. I think that would be a very lethal line, offering a bit of everything, but especially a lot of intelligence. It's going to be a line that's going to outthink its opponents on a regular basis. Then we've got Martin Rasavi of the Columbus Blue Jackets, paired with Peter Hauser and Yaroslav Shmilar. And this is a line that is, especially in terms of the combination between Rasavi and Hauser, You combine those two together, their play is really good. You add Schmalar, who's already got some NCAA experience against older players. Great second line, something that's going to be able to help them score. Um, Verbenitz, Sturk, and Pyre would be my third line. And then we've got Kosh, Sapuchsek, and Mensik as the fourth line. So the two players that are left out of the top 12 would be Marcel and Adam Machura. So finally, we're gonna go ahead with Slovakia. Now, there's nothing at all announced yet for Slovakia either. It's the same as Finland, but Slovakia is currently running a training camp for their Europe-based prospects. So that excludes any North American sort of set prospects that they have, like Simon Nemec, Philip Massar, etc. But the roster players at that camp that are surefire players for this World Junior Championship for me are Dalibor Dvorsky of the 2023 draft, Adam Sikora, a prospect of the New York Rangers, and Alex Chernik of the 2023 draft as well. So those are the three guys that I think are almost certainly going to play for Slovakia in the World Juniors. Now, I would include Andrei Molnar in there, but he's facing criminal charges right now for a brawl that happened at a floorball game. He basically knocked someone out and broke their jaw at a floorball tournament. So when you're facing criminal charges, it's rare that you'll get to play in the World Juniors. Now, for the North American-based prospects for me who are sure to play, Simon Nemec, Philip Meshar, and Slovak Pachovsky are the three guys that I could hedge my bets on as being definite players who are going to be playing at this tournament. Nemec is probably the best defender in Slovakia right now. Philip Meshar um, might be up there with Dvorsky in terms of the most skilled players on this roster. And he had Slovak Pachovsky, who I was really high on in this draft here. He went in the sixth round to the Minnesota Wild, but I would have taken him way, way earlier than he went. So it was pretty surprising to see him drop that much. Really like his defensive game, really like his transition play and his playmaking. Those are elements that I really like of his game. And he's just stepped it up since then in juniors. So it's just been really impressive to see him go about it. The question for me with Slovakia will be in goal. With Simon Latkoczy, who was there last year, he's aged out. So that leaves a big hole in net. And for me, that just means it's up for grabs. I mean, someone's going to stand out of the lot. I'm pretty sure of it, but I'm not comfortable at all with Slovak goaltender prospects, and not nearly enough to be able to give my thoughts on who, the standout netminder who's going to take the bull by the horns and take control of that crease for Slovakia would be. So that will be it for today's episode. Thank you very much for listening all the way to the end. If you appreciated what you saw, make sure to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, and to follow along and make it your first listen of the day on all of your favorite podcasting platforms. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your sources for the day's news, scores on all of your favorite leagues. They're really the best place to get you covered on, all the information that you need to talk about sports at your water cooler with your colleagues. Now, this has been Locked On NHL Prospects. I'm Hattie Kalikesh, and I hope I see you next time.